Hello, it's Sarah from Heart Cover Hearts, and I'm back from vacation. Thrilled to have received my Reading Women t-shirt. This is in medium size, which I'm thrilled that I thought ahead to do because I ate all the pasta, all the pizza, all the gelato in Italy, and I need the extra space in the t-shirt. So thrilled to have it, thrilled to represent the Reading Women who do such a fantastic job. Some of the books that I'm going to talk about today are books that I read for last month, which was Reading Women Month. And they put together a bingo card. And I was very proud to have been able to complete a column in that and tried to I was actually looking for 2 ways to do to win the bingo card. Only completed one, but was thrilled with the endeavor. So let me jump into my week of reading. This is actually going to be a couple weeks of reading because the Wi-Fi in Italy was so spotty. So forgive me for a little bit of a long video. I'm going to try to be succinct. And I'm going to put in the show notes, I'm going to put timestamps for every book I talk about with the list of the books. That way, if you'd like to skip ahead, I completely understand. And of course, I always either show the physical copy that I have, or I'll show an image over here so that you'll be able to, as you're scrolling through, be able to see it and know where to stop. So with that said, let me jump in with what I completed. So from the red column, my first book that I completed was The Mother of All Questions by Rebecca Solnit. As you may know, if you've watched this channel, I'm a huge fan. She has signed this one. It's delightful. And this is another exemplary collection. This is her most recent collection. She's fantastic. I highly recommend if you are new to feminism, if you're interested in feminism, if you want a great, approachable collection, Rebecca Solnit is the way to go. And I think this would be a great approach. This or Men Explain Things to Me. Great starters. The next thing that I finished was my buddy read. So Teresa and I completed the Quincunx. Oh, this book makes me so happy. I was so sad to finish it. This is a huge book. 781 pages, but it was an absolute delight. It was immersive. It's a labyrinth of symbols and foreshadowing and a puzzle that needed to be solved. Historical fiction, very Dickensian. The world building, as Teresa and I were, as we're finishing up, and I said, what do you want to say about this book? And she said that it felt so good to be an immersive experience, and that it seems like that's a lost art in book writing lately. And I think she's absolutely right. I could not get enough of this. It was wonderful. And actually reading this as a buddy read was a wonderful experience because it forced us to slow down. And in slow down, we saw more that we probably would have if we read on our own. I think both of us agree we would have just binged this out. Whereas there's so many clues and there's so many things that are happening that it was really wonderful to stop, review, see what did you see, what did I see, and sharing it was fantastic. So as a buddy read, this was a fantastic choice. Thank you, Teresa, for joining me on this journey. And I cannot recommend this more highly. This was a fantastic read, 5-star. I'm actually thinking about rereading it in a year and a half. Okay, the next thing I read was something that Sean the Book Maniac had raved about, which was 13 Ways of Looking by Colum McCann. This was a very interesting, it was like short story. I think it was short. It's like short stories. Yeah. Because there was like definitely things that didn't connect, but did. I found the very first story so compelling and so beautifully written. It was a story of an old man who is dealing with his failing body and his lack of control as an elderly man. And there's a twist that happens. There's a shift in the storytelling that happens in the middle of the story that just will stun you. Really fantastic, poignant, beautifully written story. Sean, A+, great recommendation. Okay, the next thing I read, this was for Reading Women Month, and this was on the come up. And so this was for the YA written by a woman of color. So this is Angie Thomas's second book. Her first book was The Hate You Give. Really great exploration of Black Lives Matter told through the eyes of a teenager who's straddling an elite school that she goes to that's predominantly white, and her home environment, which is a neighborhood that is predominantly African American. This one instead, though, focuses on a young woman who is wanting to be a rap star, who has skills and who writes poetry and has this ambition and makes really suspect choices just under impulse. She's an impulsive person, and she gets herself in a ton of trouble by making decisions that she doesn't understand the ramifications of. Really, really enjoyed this. If you like YA and if you want to read more women of color, and specifically YA written by women of color, this was it was a really fun read. Next up, I read Monkey Grip by Helen Garner. This was a very interesting read. So what was specifically interesting about it was a gift to me by a coworker who works in Australia, who I had a really interesting conversation, really great conversation, that I was reading more Australian literature. And he had been reading it and pulled it out and said that Helen Garner was someone he was reading currently. And he came back to the United States and brought it specifically for me after he finished. I won't say that I loved it. I could see this being incredibly compelling at the time that it was written. It was a story of a woman who has an addiction for love. She wants to be loved, and she manifests that through sex. And so it's a very free time. It's in the 70s, and she's living in unusual circumstances, and she has an addiction to love, and she falls in love with someone who is addicted to heroin. And so there's a lot of the narrative spirals, as addiction usually does. And so if you need a plot-driven book, this is not your book. If you want an experience of a different time and place and kind of something that is experiential, that you get submerged in this narrative, this would be a good one for you. There was no context in this, and that was something that I recognize that I need some context as to why people act a certain way. You were dropped into the current state, and you're in a linear forward traction. There's no backward looking, there's no reflection. It's all just forward, and sometimes it's just repetition, as I mentioned. So it didn't work for me. I'm glad I read it. I want to read more Helen Garner because I thought her writing was really beautiful, and there were passages that I really liked, but as a whole, I wasn't a fan of that. But next up was a book that I was a fan of, and this was a cozy historical mystery. This is by Jennifer Ashley, and it's Death in Kew Gardens. I really like this series. This is the third of the series that I've read, and I really like it because it's incredibly detailed, and the details are in what happens underneath the stairs, what happens in the kitchen specifically. The main character is a cook in a fancy house of the aristocracy. There's some really great characters. A lot of class is discussed. I always like books with class strife in it. And what I really love is all the details of the recipes and the cooking and all the things that she has to do as she's solving these crimes and solving these mysteries, along with some other really great characters in the book. She also still has to put the food on the table for these people that house her. So really fun. This had also some racial components too, because there was a gentleman from China who was being accused of a murder, and so you get to see that aspect of the Chinese influence at the time, because Orientalism, with all of the vases and all of the artifacts that were being brought back from China, were starting to be popular and faddish. And so what does it mean when a country steals some of the precious things from another country, and the implications of that? It was light romp. It wasn't meant to be anything serious, but I really enjoyed it, and I like her writing style. So I'm going to continue with that when the next one comes out. That was a brand new release, so I grabbed it as soon as it came through. So you can find that in her previous ones, I'm sure. Next up was my other buddy read, The Leopard by Giuseppe di Lampedusa. This one I read with Mia, and we just raved about this book. I was so fortunate with two amazing buddy reads just from the get-go. I wanted to read this one specifically. It's set in Sicily, and it's considered a modern classic. I had heard so much about it for so many years, and in anticipation of my trip to Italy, I wanted to read Italian fiction and modern classics, and so this one came up for me. Mia was such a fantastic buddy read with this. She noticed so many things and had a different perspective, being as she lives in Germany, and so she had different understanding of the region that I wouldn't have known being here in America, and how little we understand and are taught about European politics and history. So it was a wonderful read, really much more modern than I expected. So much symbolism. It really was about the death of a culture, and as Italy was starting to unite, and the changes socially and politically that was bringing, told through an aristocratic family. And really loved the book, loved the experience of reading, having it through a buddy read, and thrilled with that experience. So The Leopard, 5 stars. It was so good. Then when I was in Italy, I picked up an Iris Murdoch book on the very first day when we arrived. It was The Italian Girl, and I thought, oh, wow, how perfect. So I had never read Iris Murdoch. Someone on Facebook had just asked me if I had read an Iris Murdoch, so it seemed fated. So grabbed it and started reading it, and I had to say, didn't love it. I didn't like the characters. I didn't feel connected to any of it. Her writing was beautiful, really well written, very easy to read. Spun through it very, very quickly, but it didn't really leave me with any lasting impressions or lasting bits. I have some visuals that she definitely evoked a sense of these nutty characters and what they were going through, but it was a pretty bleak tale, and there wasn't a lot of beauty. There wasn't a lot to hold on to, or lessons or resonance of anything that offered any hope or light. So those are not really my favorite types of books. So it was a pan for me, but I am very glad I read it. Next up was just a fun, it was so freaking hot in Italy. It was like 97 degrees, and I just couldn't focus to read. So I grabbed an audiobook that came from my library that came up, and it was such fun. And I read it on the 4th. I was listening to it at the 4th of July while at the beach in Sorrento. So couldn't have been happier. It was Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This is a romance between a future son of a female president and the son of the English queen. So there's a romance. There's coming out of the closet and trying to deal with what would a romance look like between two powerful nations' sons. It was fun. It was hot. It was romantic. Everything that you want from a really fun audio romance. So loved it. Thought it was super great fun for what it was, and I gave it 3.5 stars. And then I did whiz through on the very last day in Sorrento. I whizzed through In West Mills, and this is by Deshaun Charles Winslow. What a great book. In the 1920s, and we follow the main character, who is an ornery, independent, do-it-herself, go it alone, take it or leave it kind of woman. I'm here for it. And she is somebody who just wants to love on her own terms and wants to be left alone and wants to do her thing. And you know what? Her thing is she enjoys a drink. And she is going to enjoy her drink, and no one's going to get between her and her enjoyment. And if you don't like it, you can pack it up. And she has these two relationships that are very meaningful one with a man who's a very good man, but she's just not in a place to commit. And then she has a friend, and this is a friend who cares for her deeply. And it's the relationship between, in this small community, as she makes some decisions and has to live with the consequences of those decisions, and how it plays out with her community. I absolutely adored this book. I thought it was wonderfully written. It had so many elements of, the main character had elements of Janie from Their Eyes Were Watching God, which I thought was divine. So I highly recommend it. It doesn't have the gravitas that Their Eyes Were Watching God has, but it definitely gives you those vibes and takes you back to a different place in time, and is very, very heartrending. I really, really liked it, and I highly recommend In West Mills. I know Russell from Ink and Paper blog had put a big flag on this one as something people were going to read. So thank you, Russell. A+ with that one. Great choice. Okay, so let me talk about what I'm currently reading. I am reading Kintu. This is my third buddy read. I'm reading this with Olive and also with Jacqueline. I'll link to their channels below. And we are just really absorbed in this. This is such a compelling read. It is from the get-go, from the absolutely opening scene, you are pulled into this. It is very accessible, although it is, you're dropped into a different culture, but it doesn't feel too unattainable to understand. So many human elements in here, so many universals, but also so many specifics about the culture. This is set in Uganda, and it's a multi-generational story. We've only done our first check-in, but we all have very, very high hopes for this book. Then the next book I'm reading, I was going to take this on holiday with me. I decided at the last minute to keep it here because I didn't want to mess with it. And it's kind of a deeper read. And this is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. I'm still not 100% with it. I'm continuing to read it. There's still some things that aren't connecting entirely for me. But the writing is very beautiful. So I'm continuing on with this. I'm also listening to the audiobook that is really, really good. It's Flash Count Diary, Menopause and the Vindication of Natural Life. And this is by Darcy Steinke. I really am enjoying this read. There is such a lack of stories and works based on this time in a woman's life, and every woman goes through menopause, and yet it is something that's not talked about. It's something that's not shared. There's even very little known medically about it. Doctors will tell you, oh, it's different for every woman, as if it's, every woman experiences it completely differently, and there's just nothing out there. And she talks about that, and she talks about how what her experience was, and then she also does a look at animal life and how animals go through this, and corollaries to her experience, and then pulling any kind of research that she can find. So it's a really interesting look at it. I'm enjoying the audiobook very much. I'd say I'm about maybe a third of the way through, but so far I'm really enjoying it. And then the last thing that, two more things. I grabbed this when I was in Florence, and this is Celestial Bodies. This won the Man Booker International, and this is by Jokha Alharthi, and the translation is by Marilyn Booth. I'm enjoying this very much. I haven't gotten any further in it than I was when I think in one of my last videos from my Catch and Release, I think I talked about this. It's multi-generational, different perspectives. It's an Omani book, which I have not read any Omani work before. So I think Sean also really liked this. So Sean, you're on a roll. Okay, and then this one is, I just started this, and this is I think I'm a little bit of a hate reading this, actually, to be perfectly honest. 3 Women by Lisa Taddeo. I was so looking forward to this. It's the book of the month choice this month. The concept is that this is a study of female desire. It's nonfiction. Lisa Taddeo studied 3 women, and the first part of the book, she talks about her methodology and how she is approaching this. But I have to tell you, the writing is so clunky and so painful. At one point, she starts off a section in second person, and then somewhere she just switches to third person. It's very staccato. It doesn't flow. I think her underlying assumptions are really suspect. I'll do a full review when I'm done with it, but just to give you an idea, these are all of the things I've notated, and none of them are passage. Only one of them is a beautiful passage that I think was well written. Everything else is just, and I'm really disappointed, because we need more writing about female desire and female sexuality that is informative and hot and enlightening. And this ain't it. It's not it. And I thought it was going to be. It was really hyped that way. And I also think this is not a feminist work. Britta Bolin and I have been chatting about it, and it can't be a feminist work if the underlying premise is desire is something that just overtakes you as a compulsion, and you have no choice in it. I just think it's a little nonsensical. I also don't like that it was all said in the United States without any kind of context that this is experience of 3 women in the United States, or what that could mean. And no women of color. There's just a lot here. So expect a full review of this when I get done with it. But I would say if you have been interested in this, get it from your library if you want to read it. I will also do a video about recommendations. I'm going to do it a little later today, and I'll try to get it up soon. But I want you to know that I don't consider myself the end-all be-all. These are just my opinions and my reactions to these books. I would hope if you want to read something, if something still appeals to you, you should absolutely read that, and you should let me know your thoughts based on your history and your interests and everything that you've read before and experienced. So I know that this has been buzzed about and people are excited about this, and I don't want to ruin your joy. I just don't want you to waste your money on a hardback book that is pretty expensive. So maybe take it out from the library, see if it's on Scribd, do it that way and experience it and see and let me know your thoughts. And then last is the Mood Roulette. So I really only have one thing in my Mood Roulette that I'm teeing up. And that's just because I've got so many books that I'm currently in progress with that I really want to get some traction with. But I am dying to read this. This was my other book of the month choice this month. This is The Gods of Jade and Shadow by Sylvia Moreno-Garcia. I'm here to tell you I loved Signal to Noise that she did. I thought it was so much fun and it was so entertaining and unexpected. I have really high hopes for this, especially because this was my other choice, and this is such a disappointment that I'm really hoping this one does it for me. So that's it. That's my full video. I will try to edit this down so it's not so long, but thank you for watching, and I hope your weeks of reading have been great. Let me know what you're reading, what's interesting to you, and thanks for watching. Bye.